Okay, I think we've got Katie. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. Thank you today for joining us on our after lunch webinar series, this time on a Wednesday. We're looking forward. We're going to talk a lot about cybersecurity and some of the threats that are coming at us from everywhere. Really excited about today's panel. I'd like to welcome all the attendees. Special thanks to Lisa Sherwin-Wolf, Danielle Rogers, Jessica Primazon, Tim Brown, and the rest of the SolarWinds team. They've been a good partner of ATARC, and we're really looking forward to this event. So what you can expect today is we're gonna have an interview with everybody. We're gonna hear what they have to say. We're gonna have a lot of questions. We're also gonna put some poll questions in there, and we think that's important for the interaction. Helps you with your CPE credits, and then you can ask questions. So if everybody can come on, I think we've got almost everybody. I will do some quick introductions, followed, and then I'll go through a sequence with everybody on the panel to talk a little bit about what they're working on a day-to-day basis, and then I'll ask some questions. So I'll start off with you, Katie. Are you on? Did you get the audio? Still working it? Okay. Okay, good. We'll get back to Katie in a minute. We've got Mike with us, Micah Sigzan. Hopefully I didn't mess that up too much. Chief Information Security Officer, Georgetown University. And that doesn't look like anywhere near Georgetown there, Micah. Where you've, looks like another alien planet.
Yeah, we're calling in from Mars.
Okay, good. I love that. Alyssa will take care of you on that. We'll get you up and going here. And we also have with us Bob Kolaski, who is the Assistant Director of National Risk Management Center, Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency. How are you doing today, Bob?
Good, Tom. How are you?
Good. It looks like you're at the office today.
I am by myself, properly socially distanced.
Fantastic. I guess that's the office in Ballston, or?
Yes.
Okay, great. And we also have Thomas Sullivan, Assistant United States Attorney, Deputy Chief, National Security and Cybercrime Section at Department of Justice. How are you doing today, Thomas?
Doing great, Tom. How are you?
Good. Are you at the office today or working from home? Looks like
the office here in Greenbelt, Maryland.
Fantastic. And we also have Tim Brown, Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President of Security at SolarWinds.
Thanks,
Good
Tom.
afternoon, Tim.
Good afternoon.
Great. Is that the office or?
That is the home office.
The home office.
Yes, with all my wife's things in the background that I can't move.
And where is the home office?
That would be north of Austin, Texas.
Great, one of my favorite places. And I think we have the aforementioned Katie Arrington, Chief Information Security Officer for Acquisition and Sustainment, Under Secretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. Hi, Katie. It looks good. We got you. And
in the beautiful Pentagon.
I love it. Great. I wasn't sure we're going to get you on video today, but I'm glad we had it. We made
You're
that
allowed
work.
one or the other, video or sound. So I'm dialed in and I'm on video.
We're all good. So maybe we're going to, each of the panelists we'll talk for a little bit here. Maybe we'll start off with you, Thomas. It'd be great to know a little bit about what you're working on a day-to-day basis. And I think we talked about this, the prep call, kind of like how your job might have changed here over the last year plus. And you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. So I'm the Deputy Chief of the Cybercrime National Security Section. I've been with the department for about 12 years, and I've been here in Maryland for 8. About 2 years ago, we saw a rise in cybercrime, and we also had a busy national security practice, whether it's domestic terrorism, international terrorism. So we formed this unit, and we weren't sure how much cybercrime we were going to get, honestly, because we're just starting the section, and we found an explosion. But between the rise in ransomware over the last couple of years, between computer intrusions, which are for several reasons. One is just for money. One is to just, corporate, corporate malfeasance, but really trying to hoover information. And we found a lot of nation states doing that. And on a day-to-day basis, what we're really doing is we're working to try to put out fires, but almost more importantly is working with the private and public sector to reach out and just communicate that we're here, and when something happens, to reach out to law enforcement and to our office. We've seen a huge difference in the ways these investigations play out, and it really depends on how quickly a victim comes to law enforcement. We've had cases where someone said, I had an intrusion. When did it happen? 8 weeks ago. Our servers have been wiped. We're back to business. There's not much we can do. But in a lot of cases where somebody calls while it's going on, we really have the ability to not only work with federal agencies or law enforcement, but the intelligence community to help best fight this problem. And what we've seen as a trend is the technology has increased. The methods of committing these offenses has increased, as well as the locations where they're committing them. So we're chasing people all over the world doing this. And what I would say with respect to outreach is really the sooner that we can do this, the better. And we've had great outreach between FBI and working with CISA, and obviously they've been a huge help in helping get the word out about intrusions and how to stop them as best we can. And the one thing we have in common is we know it's coming, so we just have to do our best to sort of deal with that. And that's basically what I'm doing on a day-to-day.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later, but it's almost like an arms race between the folks that are trying to do the intrusion and you coming up with the technology to figure that part out. But great. How about we'll go with you, Katie. Love to hear it. We haven't had you on in a couple months. I'd love to hear the latest.
On everything that we've been doing to thwart our adversary, it's been a busy
Maybe pick
few months.
maybe pick one or two things. How about that? Yeah.
So, we're moving forward with, the big push right now on Zero Trust. CMMC is a part of Zero Trust. It's something that is to help one of our DIB partners or our DIB partners get the critical thinking around cybersecurity. But, I'm just going to foot stomp. We have seen record numbers of ransomware attacks where small businesses just are not prepared to deal with that. It's the one that comes to mind most, was Christmas Eve, getting that phone call from a company. We've seen a significant uptick in ransomware. We've seen a significant uptick since SolarWinds. Just, I say SolarWinds was the pebble that dropped into the pond, and the ripple effects. And as we're seeing them, the ripples are getting bigger and bigger. So we have been, trying to get the word out about Zero Trust. How CMMC is one part of it. It's a bunch of different things, capabilities, processes, and policies that all culminate together to buy down the risk of adversary influence in our supply chains and our business operations. So it has been full throttle. I don't think anybody on this call has had a day off, and forever it seems that this is just, I think it's a new state of being, and it just, every day, something new, a different TPP. The adversary is very active, and we in the Department of Defense, thank gosh for Cybercom and what, our authorities in that capacity, but definitely very busy, Zero Trust, CMMC, what we can do to help the DIB.
I heard there's a Zero Trust memorandum coming out. Is that imminent or from the Department of Defense, OSD?
I've seen iterations of it. Coordination in this building is something that is an art form. So imminent, it depends on where it is in the building. But we're actively working it. I will credit my partners in CIO, Mr. Dave McEwen. He's the cyber CIO. Definitely been him and Mr. Sherman's primary function lately has been ensuring Zero Trust. But that's one of the misnomers on that is, we get these buzzwords and we think that they're an easy button and you press the easy button and everything's better, and it's not. Zero Trust is a complex culmination, as I stated, of different capabilities, processes, policy, products. It's just doing things to buy down the risk, continually buying down the risk. As we've seen, software has, obviously SolarWinds We have software out, most of our hardware is software enabled. How do you build in risk reduction strategies when you have to take I would say the offensive and defensive posture that nothing is 100% secure, and what are you doing to secure what you can?
Great, great. Next up, let's go with Bob Kolaski. Obviously, you're responsible for getting out all this information, and boy, there's been a lot of information to get out lately.
Yeah, I like Katie's answer. I mean, what's changed is we're busy and more focused, right? But it's a level of effort, it's a level of intensity, it's a level of requirement that's putting on this. We at the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, we like to fancy ourselves as the nation's risk advisor about these sorts of risks. And I can say we've got a lot of advice that we're pushing out. We're getting lots of questions about how to deal with software challenges, supply chain risks, some of the themes that we've already talked about earlier. So we certainly feel like there's a need to be in constant communication across the interagency with vendors who are particularly helping organizations, mitigate and understand the consequences of what's happening with field staff like the Bureau across the country, with organizations that have been impacted. And then on the CISA side, such a big part of our role is helping support the security of the overall.gov and working with the other agencies to help advance the overall.gov. CISA's got a lot of authorities, in particular on federal networks, and this is a wake-up call for federal networks. This is a wake-up call. Congress is, what happened in the congressional interest and the oversight that we're getting, and the recognition that the governance, the IT systems in place, some of the structural barriers, acquisitions policy, some of all those barriers have left us in a worse place than we had hoped we would be from an overall .gov security, from an overall federal IT systems management. And so how do we, Katie talks about the challenge in the building of the Pentagon and deal with the various organizational elements within the Department of Defense, but how do we do that in civilian space without a Secretary of Defense sitting over all those elements? It's hard enough with one secretary. And so DHS working there, and this is where the activity at the National Security Council level here, the interagency planning to come together collectively to make improvements across the .gov has been really a big focus of CISA over the last few months.
Great, thank you for that. And how about you, Micah, over at Georgetown? I know a lot of universities seems like they've gotten a lot of ransomware action over the last couple of years, but I'd love to hear your perspectives.
Sure. Well, I haven't been at Georgetown very long. I spent 18 years in federal government. In fact, I worked with Dave McEwen at the Pentagon for a while at JSP. So, this is a whole new environment. Yeah. So, higher ed has certainly seen its fair share of increased cyber attacks. Ransomware has always been a big concern, but we've seen so much of it. And so we're really, when I came on board, we really are focusing on cyber hygiene and doing the things that we need to do regardless of what the adversaries are doing. And what we found is a lot of that really helps to protect us against whatever the emerging threat is. And then we're just really keeping an eye on what we're seeing, watching the attacks, and trying to. We're always trying to anticipate what's going to happen, but finding those holes, plugging those holes, making sure our staffs are trained and ready. It is a fight, right? We're not protecting soldiers on the battlefield, but we are protecting students, and we are protecting our faculty and staff. So we do look at it as a battle, as a fight, and these are attackers, these are adversaries. And so we do see this as our battlefield, and we're trying to attack it that way. And just like any army, we've got to make sure that we're well provided, we have the right tools, we have the right resources, and that we have the right strategy. So we've created a new strategic plan for how we're going to get to zero trust, and whatever that may mean now, and however that evolves in the future. But we're looking at how do we really protect the university's ecosystem, not just for the next year or 2 years, but for the next 10 years. And I mean, that's a lot of goal. That's a huge effort. But I think we've got some great people on board. I think we can get there.
Fantastic. And last but not certainly not least, we have Tim Brown with SolarWinds. Love to hear your perspectives. Of course, you guys were subject to a nation state exploiting something people hadn't seen before, but I just can't wait to hear what your perspectives are. You know, what you see in government as well, and what you see over in industry, and are there similarities there?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's been a busy last 4 months. So I think for everybody in the world. And for some of our customers that weren't really affected by this, they were still affected, right? They still had to do research. They still had to determine what was in place in their environment. And so yeah, absolutely a major event across the world. And I think also an inflection point for us. The fact that it really could happen, theoretically, we always thought that it could happen. Theoretically, we said, yeah, you can get, a piece of software in there, you can get distribution, you can do this from a theoretical perspective. But I think what our incident showed is that, theory is truly practice, right? And one of the things that we've learned from a lot of threat actors from history is that once you see one event, I like your pebble in the pond model.
It's going to continue.
Yes, that we will see more, right? We will see more. It's proven that it was able to occur. And yeah, it happened to me, but it can happen to others as well. This adversary was, not simple. They were quiet, they were stealthy, they lived off the land, they only were there when they needed to be there. They weren't noisy or making noise anywhere. So a different level of adversary that we had we had seen and that we were really truly prepared for. So where I see it's an inflection point, I think it's an inflection point for, basically the industry at large, right? That says that, we can do better in many different areas. We can do better as software providers. We can be more transparent about, how we develop software, how we ensure software is correct, how we make sure that we go from source code all the way down. And I'm a big fan of Zero Trust, so we'll use that as well. But but truly, in my model right now, I trust no one and no things, right? That's kind of it's my mindset right now. So we've done a lot in the last 4 months to get ready and get things fixed up and get releases out and get all of those types of things done. And now it's time for us to really help the industry and help us move forward, both from a private and public sector. CIS has been a great partner through this throughout they've been here since, December 13th, December 12th, right when this occurred. So we've had good partnership. The research community has been really good partnership. We've had probably more sharing on this event than I've ever seen. And that's very good, right? So more sharing, more information, more knowledge, and more ways to defend. So I think that will continue. But we also see, as we talked about, some pending legislation on how software may be built. Software bill of materials, those types of things. So it is absolutely a wake-up call and an inflection point for us that many will see changes occurring in from both public and private sector perspectives.
Great.
Can I comment back on that?
Yeah,
Sure.
Sure. First of all, Tim, you guys at SolarWinds are from the Department of Defense, you have been an amazing partner. And that is something that, I have been, and I know Bob, we have been discussing. Threat should not be a four-letter word. It should be something that we share, because we all share it. But the fact that, SolarWinds and the team there was so willing to lean in to help, right? And that should be the marker of how every company responds, because there is nothing that is 100% secure. So my hat's off to you guys. Thank you for leaning in, doing the right thing, rolling up your sleeves and working with the IC community and DHS to get a solution out there and to, be a leader. And that's the way we need to have companies represent. When there's something that's happened, you cannot generally, I say this, We have nation states that are working, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over many years. I've talked about it for years, that the adversary's been low and slow, quietly, just extracting at a low rate all of the information that they want to come at an event as we've all seen play out. So just to thank you, sir, and to your team for being true good citizens of this country.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject, maybe we can go to you, Bob. Have we learned anything from this incident that are going to help us down the road? And love to hear what you have to say about that. There you go.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've undoubtedly learned things. One of the things is in this area that the National Risk Management Center focuses a lot on within CISA, better understanding of critical software, better understanding of where that software has access, and things that have, that aren't immediately clear to a CEO that have huge consequences to you as an organization if something happens. We call this supply chain security. We call it supply chain risk management, about understanding the hardware and software that you rely on to do business and to do critical processes. But that actually means differentiating between the hardware and software you rely on to do critical processes, and doing your own survey of what your critical processes are, how that's interacted with how you're deploying software in this case, and what's your plan against that. And that learning that has to happen, and you can manage risk at the front end by design, by taking less trust into the system. You can manage risk by your acquisition decisions, your supply chain decisions of what you're doing, of asking the questions of the organizations that have access to your critical software. And those are the kinds of things that we want to be pushing there, which lead to, again, at least less risk space. And then you can also, learn to, quicker recognition that things are happening, quicker questions getting asked. And so when we talk about supply chain risk management, we've also learned from the sort of information sharing perspective of, making sure that we have the ability, we don't enter into contracts so that if something happens in one space, it doesn't get out into the ether as a whole. As Katie said, we've got to not have a blame the victim. We've got to not have, your first inclination is to protect, what's happening to your systems, even at the expense of what could be happening to your neighbor's systems or somewhere else. And there have to be ways to push out information there. We have to spread it as quickly as possible. Speed to recognition of risk. And another thing I think we're going to be grappling with is, an incident of this scale, what is the overall national response capability? What's the overall mitigation capability? And by this, I mean, this includes the private sector who's helping here. And how are we going to have depth of remediation so that we can anticipate things bigger than what just happened? So we have some path of depth of national remediation. We can prioritize that. Again, that means taking advantage of private companies who do this, because so much of the capability is there, but what's the right mechanism to do there? So those are some of the early learnings, like how do we then design policy solutions to address those? How do you design practices at the entity level to address those? We'll keep pushing out our advice, certainly for the entity level, and contributing to the policy process.
Thank you. And Micah, you want to add anything with your government experience on this, as we've had these threats through the years kind of thing?
Well, I say that, again, I do want to reiterate what Katie said. I think that SolarWinds and all of those involved have really been forward in their, coming forth, but to the entire community and saying, hey, here's what happened, right? And it's, really opening up themselves to, a lot of criticism. And I'm sure that was a very difficult decision. And yet, here you are saying, look, we have a problem, and not we, SolarWinds, but we as the entire community. It really is a shared risk, right? And we're all connected. I definitely take I don't trust anybody either. But yet I recognize that we are connected to so many other organizations, whether it's, Google or AWS or Azure, O365, whatever it is, we have our fingers in all pieces, no matter who you are. And so, when organizations like SolarWinds and FireEye and other Microsoft come forward and say, hey, here's what happened, right? And we need help from the entire community in order to fix this problem. And I think that is phenomenal. Because I think we really haven't seen that before. It's always, oh, well, we got a problem, we're going to hide it, right? And so now we've really just opened this up to everybody. And it's incumbent, universities and research centers, our national labs, right? They do phenomenal things at the national labs that I think the community has and can continue to take advantage of. Because there's just things that they can do that nobody else can do, right? They can really truly think outside the box beyond what is possible in other organizations. And so really, organizations like CISA who work to bring all of these public, civilian, corporate, government all together in order to solve this problem. I think that's why we've been able to make this significantly less than what it could have been.
Yep. Thomas, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I have another question queued up for you, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, just adding to Katie's point, I mean, we know whether it's national security, cybercrime, it's all melding together, and they're taking their time, whether it's the OPM hack or Target, or where they're stealing hundreds of millions of credentials. They're having a whole of government approach to that, and we need to take the best of what we have, which is the government and private sector, and work together. That's the only way that we're going to effectively address the threat.
Yeah, and if you look at them, they also share better than we do, right? They don't have the limitations of sharing. So, I think in this instance, we did a fairly good job sharing, but I think in general, we have to figure out the sharing capabilities and, just how we do even better, right? Because they don't have that problem, believe me, right? I mean, their models that they utilize are, well known and shared between others. So that's just kind of when we look at the adversaries, that's what we're up against. So the more we can do from a industry perspective to share, the better off we end up being.
Great.
That actually comment, I'm sorry, but that really resonates, Tim, that statement of they share. We look at ourselves, which is, I like to sign off most of my emails and video webinars, one team, one fight, because it's about this country. It's really about this country. Yeah. And we have issues sharing information with each other. There are barriers in place, and, as this legislative session comes, really starts to be more robust about the recommendations out of the National Cyber Solarium Report. Yeah. Breaking down those barriers about what we can share and how we can share it with each other have to become, one of the bigger emphasis. You don't want to get into we don't want to get into social scoring, right? Very, 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 very bad. Yep. But we also, when an event, SolarWinds, FireEye happens, that, we have ransomware going on, from water treatment facilities to police offices to small businesses, that if you're not prepared, we've watched this influx of small businesses go out of business because they just don't have the resources to pay for it. We need to get to a point where sharing that is good. Let me know, because that Internet of Things, I always talk about, tell me one thing in your life that doesn't have cyber in it. And jokingly, somebody said love, and I said, no, I met my third husband on eHarmony, see the algorithm work.
There you go.
We are all interconnected on this, and that anything that I have as a risk, I think that's what Bob, if there could ever be something on the, epitaph of his life from the day that it started till the day that it ended, in it is that everything mattered to the supply chain. Bob Kolowaski, 2097, I'm giving you a long longevity there, brother. But that really, it all is interconnected. It all matters. And we have to get to a level of understanding that you, working with you, that you understand the risks, that you're doing your best to buy it down so that we can interact. But we're never going to get to a 100% secure product. Even if we do the software bills of lading, our adversaries, I have to say one of the things that made me go, is we had a pen testing software that was compromised, so our reaction is to pen test all software?
Right.
Are we thinking like our adversary? Are we doing exactly what it's, we have to start thinking differently and acting differently, and sharing is one thing.
Yep.
Over.
And Thomas, kind of where Katie was going, like, how do you keep ahead of these criminals? They're smart. How do you keep ahead of them? Is you're trying to prosecute them? How do you keep ahead technology wise from your office? And
It's a challenge, and we have somebody, a cybercrime coordinator, and his job is to just come up with what are the latest trends in the technology that is being used. Some criminals are being caught because they use DoorDash. We need to find one mistake, one slip up. Like Silk Road, it was one post 15 years before he got arrested. So it's looking at for every little breadcrumb. And the problem is there's just so much to look for. We just have to try to work with our partners, not only in the federal agencies who know the IT, but also the private sector. I mean, we've got 2,000 cleared contractors in Maryland doing a whole host of things, and at universities, and they can all bring a lot of resources to bear. And we just try to, as best we can, work with everybody to try to see not only the current threats, but sort of what's on the horizon.
Yeah, and I'll ask you, Tim, we got a question from somebody. It's pretty good. What have you learned from this now that you wish you knew before, and how has that changed the way you guys do business?
Yeah, so a number of different things, right? So being prepared for a general kind of normal attack is one thing. Being prepared for a large nation state is another thing, right? So I think we had very good cyber hygiene in place. We had very good controls in place. We had endpoint protection. We had good network controls, good checks for our software, check marks at every build, white source in every build, good external pen testing, all of these things that were reasonable, what you would think would be done. They hit us somewhere I didn't expect. They absolutely hit us in that end piece. Looking backwards, I probably should have thought of that, right? And said, hey, this is the end point. That's where people would be going at, the last link in the chain. But we didn't have the double checks in place. We put the double checks in place now so that we, not only build software, but we install it, decompile it, and check it back against source. So things like that we would have put into place. One of the things I tell, just generally everybody, I ran 3 different networks. I ran a lab network that was, kind of a playground, which was fine. It wasn't connected to anything. A production or corporate network, very tightly controlled. That's where all my financial services goes through SOX audits, very controlled, very policy driven. And then I had my development network. Each one was separate people. Each one was separate networks, each separate thing. And I truly gave a little too much flexibility to my developers in my development network. And, whenever I talk to people with development teams, they say, well, we do too, right? We give our developers, the ability to run a different operating system, or give them administrative rights, or give them application rights, or have more flexibility for their development community than the rest of their production environment. So that's one of the things that I've switched, right? My policies and my procedures and my all my controls in production are now on my development team. Now it has kind of slowed things down. They fight a lot less after this event, right? Because they were, very mad, right? So if people ask me, how's my development community responded to these controls? And they're very acceptant. 6 months ago, would have they been acceptant? Probably not, right? I would have been fighting. So when you look at appropriate controls in place for your development community, it's really important to think about those as well. So that's one of the big lessons that we have is doing those things, and just preparing for that next level of attack, that next level of patience, and looking towards both what we call secure by design, which means that we touch security in every place that we have and every aspect. And then, essentially some of the things that I've put into place moving forward is literally looking for double keys on everything, right? So now my Check-ins to source code don't just take a peer review, they take an architect and a peer review. They have double checks from a build perspective, a triple build environment, which will build in a clean room that's not connected to us, a dev environment and a lab environment, and there compare the results. But no one entity would have access to all three of those. So those safeguards make it much more difficult for this type of attack to take place. So, and those are just the start of ideas. I think we have to share ideas of how to become more resilient to threat actors inside of an environment, and then single points of failure.
Katie, we actually have a question for you. How did this CMMC change with the SolarWinds attack? What substantive things did you rethink as part of your policy?
So CMMC is about getting a company set up, not necessarily software, but it definitely gave us, we, in response to all of the events, we stood up a Tiger team inside the building to review the CMMC to make sure that we were looking at all the right things. So we're just in the process of getting that final report in, but we absolutely took it as a moment. I think everybody has to take it as a moment and say, what are we doing? What are the best practices? Juice worth the squeeze. One of the bigger things out of this entire event is the capacity of having a DNS. But you have to think that all the way through. Unless you let a company know you're doing it, a U.S. company holds the same rights as a U.S. person. And DNS reduces your communication, your capability, that First Amendment. So you really need to stop and think, is that okay, if we do that, are we leaning in a different direction than we want to? But how do you help a company understand a great deal of risk could be brought down by, getting a DNS capability that builds down to that zero trust? How do you get that out there? And can you put it into the CMMC? Can you recommend it? Well, those are the type of things we're kind of looking at it going, well, could we do that? It's a fine line, because we love the fact that we live in a democracy and that we're able to have free speech, and that, how we implement it is a little bit tricky. Not to say it's not doable. NSA is running an amazing Pathfinder program where companies have volunteered. I think it would be amazing if I could get my large primes to do things like that, to create cloud environments for the smaller businesses to enter into to do work, versus having to, I would say, one of the bigger things is reduce your surface exposure, right? So if I have one cloud instantiation and 10, 20 small businesses within it versus having 20 different instantiations of cloud, I'm lowering the risk. But you have to help foster that thought. I mean, I think that's one of the areas that we really, with the CMMC, the Tiger team coming back and thinking, how can we help industry help itself and help each other in those regards? And without this event, I don't know that would have happened. I mean, you started this conversation off with the fact that this was a theory, like we all discussed, bad things are going to happen. I think where we are is at the precipice of something that I don't want to see happen. And we all have to really, not just talk this, but walk this, is when cyber equals safety. And we're right there. When a water treatment plant gets hit and a police department gets hit, you're talking about cyber equaling life. And we have got to take it that seriously. It is really that serious. And get good and do the basics. I mean, what Tom has said, what Tim has said, what Bob has said, if you do the basic things every single day in your company, in your life, you buy down the risk significantly of bad things happening. You put your seatbelt on when you get in the car, so you don't go flying through the windshield if you've been in an accident. You buy dental insurance because you're eventually going to break a tooth. We need to start thinking like that, because we haven't been there yet, and knock on wood, and I pray that we don't. But when someone loses their life over a cyber event, then, SolarWinds was one thing. When you start having people losing life over it, and cyber equals safety.
Yep. Bob, how did things change with you after this? What went into what new process did you guys come up with as a result of this attack?
Again, I don't know that it's change. Part of the change is what's going to come from legislative and policy changes and contributing to the legislative policy changes. I previewed a little bit of what's been discussed in terms of greater flexibility for information sharing, greater push on investments in IT, greater standards around critical software, getting lessons learned from incidents out into the space so that we can study those sorts of things. But to what Katie was just saying, continuing to push up the risk conversation to what is the outcome that we are trying to keep cyber from causing? What is the critical process? We use the term critical function. What is the critical function that we have to secure? And do we have the right apparatus to secure those critical functions? Do we understand critical functions? So I talk in terms of national critical functions and understanding cyber and supply chain risk to those national critical functions, putting my energy there, putting the extra government attention toward getting more visibility into what can impact critical functions, getting more tools out there, leveraging what we traditionally do to reduce risk around a lot of different things, leveraging the risk community to help the security community succeed. And so when I say the risk community, it's the board of directors, it's the chief risk officer, it's the CFO, it's the general counsel. All those people help organizations control their risks, set their risk tolerance. There's going to be a policy imperative to change the risk tolerance because we need to, because of where adversaries are going and where digitalization is going. We have to put that change of the risk tolerance into business practices, push that, get tools out there so that entities can do a better job of managing and reducing their risk. And so, it's a continuation from our perspective. It's the outcome. It's the outcome that we're trying to keep cyber and supply chain attacks from causing, and what's going to drive the decision maker to take less risk against that outcome. Let's meet the decision maker in their space, but we will change to some extent, again, risk tolerance and get more incentives and tools out there to help people reduce risk.
Great. Micah, you want to add anything?
I'll say the biggest change that I've seen is the continued discussion amongst non-cybersecurity folks about risk. And so now when we see projects, we're seeing projects with risk registers and the discussion of what's the risk, right? What's the risk for us not to do this? What's the risk? And who are the affected second and third order parties who are going to be affected, and what's their risk to this? And that has, I certainly, asked the questions when I first got here, but it wasn't a hard, people like, oh, well, yeah, that actually makes sense. And so I'm beginning to see that kind of grow organically as we in the cyber community continue to beat the drum of risk. We have a close relationship with our chief risk officer, right? And everyone in the university is really getting to understand what the risk of cybersecurity is and how much it touches every single little part, including like today with printing. Like we still have printers, and like that's a risk, right? And what's the risk, and how do we mitigate this risk? And the things that we've been talking about for years, now I start to hear them in conversations with our IT brothers and sisters, and with our project managers, and with the facilities people. And it's like, wow, that's like finally, like they're starting to get that.
Great. Melissa's pinging me. I've got to make sure we do some polls, or people aren't going to get CP credits, which is important. Hopefully these will work out, but we'll do them kind of rapid fire. So get your fingers by your keyboards. Let's go with the first one, Alyssa. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in your agency's ability to defend against these cyber threats? From 1 to 5, let's see what we have. So we'll do this one pretty quickly. I think we can answer it pretty quickly without too much thought. Okay. Melissa, we have all the entries in. Maybe we can pop those. Okay. Looks like we Probably got something like a C+. I got to pick up my daughter on Friday. I just want to see her report card. Now, yeah, so this, is anybody surprised by this or no?
I think it's high.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm really kind of shocked that you've got 45% in moderate.
I think you're probably right about that one. Let's go to the next one real quick. In your opinion, how far along is your agency in accelerating detection and prevention through the use of emerging technology? Are we using AI? Are we using, we're getting these sophisticated attacks? So this one I'm really interested in. Okay, let's give it another 10 seconds or so. I think I could tell we got a really smart crowd out there. They're going to do this quickly. Go ahead and show it, Alyssa. We got to get more to the 3% there. So for the
Well, that, and you have to remember in federal government acquisition, it ain't speedy.
no.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that I would wish that we were able to do is that we program out over a FIDAP, over a 5-year process. And that's really hard when you're like SolarWinds happens, right? And I hate to do that to you, Tim, keep you, it's just that the event of awakening, that how do you reprogram money 5 years down the road to know what's going to happen 5 years from now?
Yeah, just think about what
I'm
5
sure
years.
most companies are in that same position.
Yeah, just think about what 5 years ago looked like. So different.
Free Botox for me.
Okay, we'll do one more poll question, and I have a few more questions here. Go ahead. Last poll question of the day. While transitioning to a remote workforce, what is the most challenging thing your agency had to overcome? This one is going to be interesting. I think I know. We need to have like an all the above or A plus B or something, but we'll makes you pick.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Making you pick one is hard.
Yeah. We'll bring that up with our expert pollsters here. Let's see what we have, Alyssa. A little bit here and there. We're kind of a little bit all over.
I'll tell you, I don't think productivity, I think it's gone through the roof,
Yeah,
Agreed.
personally.
agreed. Everybody's just working all the time still, right?
Yeah.
No commute time. People online for at least 12 hours. It's kind of crazy from I would say burnout is a better another.
Working too hard, right?
It is hard for people to get breaks, believe me. So.
Great. One thing that always comes up, actually, we had a question I wanted to get to. How big of a problem is insider threat? Somebody from ex-government person asked me, so I'm gonna do that. And maybe I'll start off with you, Thomas. You prosecute a lot of cases. What's the balance of these cases that you see or consider? Is insider, is the problem of insider threat?
I would say anecdotally, from my experience, probably a third has been insider threat, probably 2/3 outsider. And unfortunately, the way the law is written, it is actually more difficult in some ways to prosecute inside threats because of the way the statute was written, which was probably 20 years ago. And obviously things have changed a little bit in computers in the last 20 years. So that's a challenge for us, but I would say about a third insider threats. That's
very interesting. How about Katie, in your experience? I'm glad he put a balance on it. I don't know. I'm just interested to see what you have to say about that.
So it's a little bit harder to have, insider threat within the building is one thing. Insider threat within the DIB is huge. And many companies have insider threat programs that are very robust. Here in the department, we have DCSA under the Undersecretary of Intelligence and Security. We absolutely, in the pandemic, it's been more of the fact that we have people who may not be using multi-factor authentication. They may be inadvertently opening the door to insider threat by the fact that they're not, imparting good security posture at home, not out in the environment, because most people were indoors for many months. But that is definitely an issue. And, adversaries, I hate to say it, because money talks, right? There's a lot of money out there in getting our secrets. People may not think that, hey, listen, I'd like to have, take over your computer. I'm calling from, an IT center to help you. And people they don't realize they're falling prey to that. And that's insider threat. I mean, those are the type of things we've really got to get better at.
Tim, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think we need to think, just as Katie said, about the non-malicious insider and the malicious insider, right? Non-malicious insider just means they made a mistake, the machine was taken over and somebody impersonated them. And I think we see more of that than what we see of the malicious insider. But, a number of us in, kind of security research believe that we'll hit an inflection point where it becomes more expensive to produce malware, to infect machines, to enter environments. And at that inflection point, you'll see that malware production goes down quickly, drops off, because it's now more economically feasible to simply hire someone, right? And bring a truly malicious insider in play. So we haven't hit that inflection point yet, but someday I think we will. Right, as we continue to harden our environments and continue to get better and better technology and continue to make it harder and harder, the insider one will be the more cost-effective model to utilize. So I don't think we've hit that yet, but I think someday we will.
Okay, I'm going to sneak a couple other topics in here. Bob, maybe I'll go with you. We've had this pandemic; it's been going on a year. Has the nature of the attacks that we've been seeing, how has that changed, if at all?
Sure. I mean, how do we correlate the rise in ransomware to the pandemic? But we can correlate the rise in ransomware to the pandemic. Yeah. How much causation do we want to get to that? I think certainly you can imagine things like school districts, schools that law enforcement that are being targeted by ransomware. They become different and more, perhaps certainly schools become a little more attractive a target in a virtual learning environment. That there's certainly all kinds of new risks that have been introduced from a technology perspective, and the fact that we're all managing our, going back to the insider, we're managing the interface between how our staffs interact with the core IT infrastructure of the organization, which creates some, and that's caused. If you trace some of the prominent attack vectors that we've seen, again, correlated, probably linked somewhat to pandemics. We've been particularly concerned about ensuring that things became really important during the pandemic around vaccine creation, vaccine delivery, vaccine production, supply chains of critical supplies around vaccines. That overall public health and public health innovation. Entities and supply chains are being secure, and cyber focus on those areas. So it's a shift in where high consequence targets are, and the adversaries follow where high consequences targets are, and new technologies and new ways that technology are being deployed, and they will follow those vectors. And so, one of the things I think we all wish, one of the lessons we all have to have on this is when operating environments change, who are the sort of technology strategists, who are the security strategists that are thinking about how, the red team of what the adversary is going to do, and then, thinking about kind of what Team Blue has to do in that environment. And I think as part of everything we've learned about the pandemic, it's being more intentional early on to be prepared for different operating environments and understand different operating environments. And those entities that do that are going to come out better in the end. And I think both on a security and a business side.
Great. Thomas, you want to add anything? I know that it takes a little while before the crime changes. What did you see when we went to pandemic? Did anything change on that? What these adversaries were doing.
I think the most curious trend initially was the first 2 to 3 months. We did see a slowdown in incidents, at least in Maryland. I think everybody's trying to get over the pandemic, but then we did see a huge increase in ransomware. Schools, police departments, we had, even going to Katie's point about public safety, people jamming up 911 lines for counties, which obviously is a huge problem. We've had a bunch of swatting cases where somebody uses a voice over IP and calls and says, hey, somebody's at this house, they've got a gun, they're gonna kill somebody. The police come and somebody walks out and they get shot or worse. So there's been a lot of just taking advantage of the chaos. And that's putting aside sort of the pandemic fraud that's been going on with some of the fake websites, which are being used to, hey, call here to get your vaccine. Just give us your information, or call here, we can save your business with a PPP loan. And that with trillions of dollars, that has sort of been a huge focus, I think, for the cyber community, because the money is just literally too good to pass up.
Right. Okay, we're at final thoughts, and I can't believe this hour has gone by so fast. Maybe we'll start off with you. Final thoughts on this topic, something we didn't bring up before, Katie, and where are we going to be next year?
Oh, next year. Wow, I think we'll be in a much different environment next year. I think that the president is definitely moving out on some very big programs. I think that the world will be different. We will have more checks and protocols in place. I am impressed with what Congress has done to facilitate additional cyber funding to entities like CISA, to be able to create more education, product awareness, etc. I think that the light bulb has gone off across the world about this, and as money starts to flow, resources start to flow, we'll definitely see a change. So I think where we are today and where we are then, a year from now, will be significantly better. I do not think worse. That's my utopic view. Well, CMMC will be moving. We've got, Bob Kowalski and the CISA team working and rocking and rolling, and people, from Micah, Tom, and Tim. I think we'll be in a better place. You can only start solving problems, issues, when you understand them. And I think we're really starting to understand them now.
Yep, well put. And Micah, besides students being in and actually being in on campus, that's a pretty big change for you.
Yeah, we are hoping to get back to whatever the new normal is, bringing students back on, faculty back on, but a lot of the staff, we're going to be remote for the foreseeable future. That's a big change for us. I think a welcome change for many people, but it's not all rainbows and unicorns. So we're going to keep the fight, and as Tim said, we're going to make it cost ineffective for the enemy to continue to attack, right? And the more communication we have amongst each other, public, private, corporate, government, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, I think Tim alluded to that, but you don't want them, you want to have your stuff taken care of so they don't attack you, and hopefully they're going to go to other pastures, hopefully not in the United States of America, but anyway. And Bob, how about you?
And we all lose a lot of money predicting where we're going to be a year from now. We are better off than we were a year ago in a lot of ways, certainly at the core of addressing the pandemic. And like Katie, I'm fundamentally optimistic that the kinds of the political and investment will be behind the kinds of ideas that have been out there for a while. We have a rare alignment, right? And when you're in this space, there's a policy window that opens often, and we have a policy window open. And I think we have a window open from an economic model perspective as well. And with that window open, let's take advantage of it. The whole horrid cliche that a crisis is a horrible thing to waste. But we're going to take advantage of this crisis, and we're going to leave the country more secure because of it.
Great. And how about you, Thomas?
I would just say I'm more optimistic just having heard the speakers on the call. It ultimately comes down to, they're targeting certain people, educating people on the cyber risk. and just working together, I think we'll be in a better place in a year from now for not only for stopping it, but also for responding to it.
Great. And Tim, you are getting the last word, and I appreciate you doing this. I really appreciate SolarWinds approaching us. I couldn't wait to do this event. I thought it was going to be very necessary. And thank you for your partnership in that. But you get the last word, my friend.
All right, perfect. So yeah, thank you everybody for being here. This was really a great event. And just to follow up from my initial comment, that I do believe this is an inflection point for us, and we will see positive change. I mean, I think we're seeing positive change from regulatory and government. I think we're seeing positive change in the private sector. And I think we will see more openness and more sharing going forward. So I do think that the year looks bright. So we will start seeing change for the better. So thank you everybody for being on.
Great. Well, thank you, Katie, Micah, Bob, Tim, Thomas, and we just enjoyed this conversation, and that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to the audience. Great questions. We didn't get to them all, unfortunately, but we have an event actually tomorrow. Why IT modernization is essential for dynamic cybersecurity. So we got a great panel, good folks on that. Should be a lot of fun. But anyway, have a good rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you much.
Guys, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.